in Scotland, Britain. Rennie Macintosh, a superintendent of police, got married and had 2 children. He then got married to Margaret Macintosh and had 10 children. Macintosh was born on the 7th of June 1868, the 4th of 12 children, and the second son of William and Margaret Macintosh. He attended Raids Public School and the Allen Glens Institution at the age of 15. In 1890, Macintosh was the second winner of the Alexander Thompson Travelling Studentship, set up for the furtherance of the study of ancient classic architecture, with special reference to the principles illustrated. Herbert McNair, a young draftsman at the firm, and Macintosh took night classes in the art and design at the Glasgow School of Art, a proper step for young architects intended on advancement in their films, and soon became attached to a circle of young women students who liked to call themselves the Immortals. The most talented were the MacDonald sisters, whose watercolours and design and posters featured thin, ethereal female figures that struck local critics as weird and spooky. Macintosh would marry Margaret MacDonald a few years later, while McNair married her younger sister Frances. The four often exhibited their furniture and interior designs and watercolors together. In 1898, Charles Rennie Macintosh joins the film of Honeyman and Copy. In 1890, Charles won the coveted Alexander Thompson Travelling Studentship for public design. With his prize of £60, he decided to travel to Italy and Europe. This trip was to change his life, and he was to develop an individual style, influenced greatly by his experiences in Europe. Macintosh also looked to Japanese art, which added a depth to his new-found ideas. Charles Rennie Macintosh marries Margaret MacDonald. Margaret MacDonald, tall and freckled with copper red hair, would have an enormous influence on Macintosh's work.
Hill House, the largest and finest of Macintosh domestic buildings, occupies a hillside that looks out over the Clyde estuary and is surrounded by grounds meticulously landscaped by Macintosh, who went to the extent of instructing that the trees be clipped according to his manner of drawing them. Built from local sandstone and rough cast rendered, the house bears the image of Scottish baronial traditions. For the interior, Macintosh designed fireplaces, furnishing, and fittings. The walls in the house were generally white, some with delicate stencil designs in pale greens, pinks, and silver. The narrow building stretches west to east, with an entrance of the road to the west, so that all major rooms face south to the view of the estuary. Macintosh redesigned external facade was a carefully considered asymmetric, abstractly modeled composition with shallow curves on some areas of the surface, and varying depth of recesses to windows and the main entrance. The composition respected the urban context of the neighboring buildings, matching the major cornice lines and heights of adjoining buildings, while still exploring emerging ideas of Art Nouveau and the modern movement. The room deluxe was the most extravagant of the rooms that Macintosh created, and proved to be the tea room main attraction. The luxurious decoration of the room can be understood as a logical extension of the Macintosh stylistic development from 1900, where they would develop all-encompassing interior design for domestic commissions, and then transfer these to their designs for commercial projects and exhibitions.
Charles Rennie Macintosh became a partner of the film Hanna and Copy. Charles Rennie Macintosh and his wife Margaret moved to France and lived in Port-Ventre, and he started drawing some watercolor paintings.
Customers lost interest in the individualistic Macintosh freestyle and took up the latest fashion, classical architecture with straight and symmetrical facades. Some trendy Glasgow architects turned to new materials and built tall buildings of steel and glass like those going up in America. The firm found business slackening and Macintosh seemed to lose interest in the practice. He sometimes disappeared at lunchtime for more than 3 hours. Macintosh's drinking began to attract attention. He spent more time in the local pub than at the construction site on one job. He entered Cappy by failing to finish plans in time to submit them for a contest. In 1913, Macintosh quit the partnership and set up shop on his own, but found practically no work. Macintosh whiled away his time in Walberswick making careful drawings of flowers in pencil and watercolor. In a few months, his wife wrote her friend that already Toshi is quite a different being, and evidently, at the end of the year will be quite fit again. After moving to Chelsea, Chelsea was a chance to start a new life. Macintosh was after all only 47, but he received a few contracts. W.J. Bestlook, a manufacturer of engineering models, asked him to renovate a house in Northampton in time for his impending marriage. Macintosh also designed a new basement for one of Katie Cranston's tea rooms. A procession of artists asked him to design studio buildings for them in Chelsea. Yet for one reason or another, all these projects but one were abundantly for construction. Macintosh resumed the drawing flowers again. "I find myself at the moment very hard up," he wrote to an old patron in 1919, "and I was wondering if you could see your way to buy one of my flower pictures or landscapes for £20 or £30. I shall be glad to hear from you this week, as my rent of £16 is overdue and I must pay your leave." He had failed to restore his career, and after 80 years, the Macintoshes moved to the south of France. A lifelong smoker, he developed cancer of the tongue 3 years later. When illness forced them to return to London, sadly Charles was later diagnosed with throat and tongue cancer. He was admitted to a nursing home where he died on December 10, 1928, at the age of 60. Margaret passed away on 10 January 1933, 5 years after her beloved husband Charles. The fame for which Macintosh had longed came soon afterward.